but it's really useful I'm here, I think, because fundamentally shrimp and small entities play a very important part in the broader ecosystem. And if those begin to struggle and die off, the whole ecosystem suffers. And I think our point here is we've reached a point in the media ecosystem where the shrimp and even some of the smaller fishes are really struggling. And for us to, for the entire ecosystem to continue to survive, it's probably time for all of us to consider cooperating, to consider partnering in ways that we haven't done before. So the topic of today's discussion is partnerships. How can we work together to really build our broader digital ecosystem? And I guess the fundamental question is, can we even do it? In this, using the ecosystem analogy, we are very different. The Hindustan Times is completely different to Google, and Dow Jones and its parent News Corp represent something different again. So can we work together? Is it viable or even desirable? And the answer isn't straightforward. So I'll throw it to the panelists. I mean, so far our discussions have been fairly collegiate, but I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive and then work towards a resolution. So my first question to everyone, really, but obviously we're going to work on Google first, Mr. Kapoor, because in the world of the ecosystem and the ocean, you're not a whale. Dow Jones is a whale. You are a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. You're something completely different. You exist in our ocean, but you are, or at least the accusation is, you're not one of us. You are fundamentally different, and you don't need us. And the base of partnership is alignment. To be able to cooperate, we need to be looking at the same objective. So the question firstly to you, Mr. Kapoor, and then perhaps to everyone else is, can we work with Google? How can we do it? And should we do it?
Okay, that's an interesting question to start the panel with. Okay, so let's take a step back. And when we look at Google, think about Google search. Google search is actually, it's a window for us. What we want to do with Google is, we want the consumer to actually get to the information as quick as they want, right? So so the way it works is it's a platform, and when you talk about working with Google, we will not exist if content creators like you are not there, right? Because what search is actually doing is directing the user to your content. And obviously it has to be the most relevant content and the quickest we can get, right? We are not a platform where we want people to consume content on search, right? Search is all about getting you to the destination. So therefore for us, it's existential for us to actually have partnerships in the ecosystem. And when we look at all of our products also, they are built around partnership, right? And think about it from a YouTube to Google Ad Manager. Most of our products actually work on revenue share models. So it's a lot to do with partnership, and also to the point where about the small publishers or bloggers, we tend to ensure that we work across the ecosystem, because at times it's just not the large newspapers who write great content. Great content can come from a blogger. Great content can come from a YouTube aggregator, right? So it's all about getting the right content to the right user. So we personally, the way we look at it, it's all about the ecosystem, and the more people we work with, the better signals we get on search, and easier we are able to get to the needs of the consumers.
Hello, Mr. Bansal, can we work with Google? Have you worked with Google? Does it work?
Sure. I mean, I think the entire industry works with Google. They're a huge source of traffic for all of us. They're also, to a large number of us, they're also a pretty significant source of monetization. I think broadly, when you think about this topic of collaboration, I think we're in the space where there's plenty of opportunities for collaboration, I think, across the entire industry. I don't see news as sort of this mano a mano, going at it, fight to the death. First of all, there's plenty of growth in this industry. In India alone, hundreds of millions of people are coming onto the internet for the first time and consuming lots of content. And a lot of the content people consume on the internet is news. So when you think about that massive growth that's coming, there's plenty of opportunities for everyone. We've shared issues that we all try to sort of work through, such as our entire business is based on authenticity and trust. And today consumers are losing a little bit of confidence in our ability to deliver on that authenticity and trust. So that's one of the reasons why a bunch of us came together and formed the DNPA. Of course, Google partners like Google, partners like Facebook. They are, in some cases, they compete against us. In a lot of cases, there's lots of scope for collaboration as well. And from our perspective, when we think about our business and how it's evolving and how it's constantly evolving at pace right now, there are other publishers, for example, in the ecosystem that we look towards because they're a little bit further ahead than us. So for example, in subscription, there's a few publishers in India who are a little bit further ahead of us, and we talk and we try to learn from them and try to learn from what their experience has been. And some areas we are ahead. We launched personalization in Mint a few weeks back, and we were the first in the industry to do that. So now I get inbounds from publishers on our side saying, okay, what have you learned from your experience so far? And I think as a result, there's plenty of scope to collaborate, plenty of scope to learn from each other, and plenty of scope to leverage each other.
Well, thanks, Raj. Joe?
So coming from Dow Jones, I wouldn't expect Rahul to expect me to jump to Google's defense, but I think there's obviously been some difficulties in relationships with publishers and some of the big tech platforms, Facebook and Google, and really that comes down to some of the realities that we know now that globally speaking, digital advertising spend, so over 50% of digital advertising spend is taken up by just a few players, and I think that's actually slightly higher in India, but someone could maybe keep me honest. But a lot of the growth is taken up by a few key players as well. So that's what's really led us as a business and many others to not pursue advertising purely as an avenue to support the future of your business on. And I think we've had the relationships are evolving, and I think it's been evolving for the better as well. If I give you one example, we as a business are not focused purely on just of course, Google, Facebook are huge traffic referrers to us, which is really important. But for us, we don't simply think about traffic. It's about conversions and subscriptions for us. And something that didn't really work for us a while ago, which we, as a business, were, I think, fairly vocal about, was Google's first click free policy. And which obviously to be indexed in search made the publisher has had to give a certain amount of content away for free, and being Dow Jones and the Wall Street Journal, it didn't really fit with our business model. As you may know, we don't give a lot of content away for free, and we're obviously focused on chasing subscriptions. So we, with a long conversation with Google over a period of time, that I think this has been listened to, and it's been understood that actually the different publishers have different ambitions and different goals, and that not perhaps one model will fit the same business goals for all publishers. So after Google listened to that and changed to its flexible sampling program, it actually was, we saw our biggest uplift in subscriptions, which fitted in with our dynamic paywall and our propensity modeling. So I think that absolutely, there's probably some more work to be done in some areas, but some of the big tech platforms are really listening to publishers now, and the relationship is evolving, especially in line with driving subscriptions.
Okay, it's a different question here, but actually following on from Joe, I think this has come up in many of our previous discussions here. It looks like, from a lot of the discussions, that the business model, the future for many of us, many of the publications here, in terms of economic viability, is subscription. So everyone is talking about subscription. The most solvent publications one can think of, including the DFT, the Financial Times, and the Dow Jones, they're subscription driven. And the question, I guess, and I can open it to the panel and maybe even take one question about it, isn't that therefore a sort of logical break with, say, Google? Because our interest is, in some cases, to circumvent, to go directly to the customer around Google and develop these relationships and to move away from the ad model, which is your model. I know there are problems. You have a Google subscription service, which is, I see it in the US. I don't know if it's yet active here. So I see Google is moving in this direction, but you know, isn't there a misalignment of interest here?
Okay, so the way we look at it, it's obvious. So it's not that one model will fit everyone, right? Yes, subscriptions is becoming very interesting, but the fact is, Google was built on an advertising model, right? And one of the reasons why we also partner with the ecosystem is because we want to learn. So for example, this room understands content better. You understand subscriptions, right? We understand technology. So why we launched the subscription model, Subscribe with Google, was yes, there is a need for this now. And while it's actually getting quite popular in the US, we've also seen very promising results in India. So some of our publishers have tried the model. We ourselves are trying. I mean, it's not a secret that we ourselves have a subscription model for YouTube. So we are trying subscription models ourselves, and it's a evolution, right? Can I say that we exactly know which user will go with the subscription model and which will go with the ad model? Right now, no. But that's where the industry is going. We're trying to understand our users better, and then we're trying to tailor the right solution for them, right? So there will be some who will be on the ad model, and there'll be some on the subscription model. So I think, so that's where we are currently going.
From our perspective, at least, we don't see subscription versus ads as an either-or. We see it as a duality, and when we look at the news industry in general over the years, it's always been both. There's been circulation where we charge for the newspapers. There's been ads in the newspapers. What consumers are telling us is, as long as you don't make incredibly annoying blocking ads which slow down websites and tear the user experience apart, they're fine with ads. So the great thing about subscriptions is it allows us to go back and focus on the core reason why consumers are coming to us in the first place, which is journalism and good, authentic, truthful, fact-checked journalism, good source of news, good user experience. So it's bringing us back to those basics. But for us, it's going to be not an either-or. It's going to be both.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, it's we're always looking to work on ways that we can fine tune the relationship, and as I mentioned, we still rely on a huge amount of traffic from Google and Facebook, which then converts into subscriptions. We're in a stage of testing with how the news initiatives and Facebook subscriber will work with our business model. But I think absolutely we're still reliant on our relationship in order to get the traffic that we can then turn into subscriptions. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily moving away and it's in competition with itself. I think it's about having the conversation with platforms and amongst publishers and looking at ways that we can fine-tune relationships that fits our own business model, which varies from publisher to publisher.
Yeah, just to add to that, it's also like when you look at it from a platform perspective, it's for us to get the technology to give players like you the tools to actually play with subscription, right? So what we're doing is just on the Play Store now we also have a product which actually gives you the option of getting a user to do trials. And you do trials, and then if you realize that this is a very engaged user, then you could actually push them towards subscription and give them subscription offers. And also, we're looking at options where you can actually give the subscription free for a month. So we ourselves as a platform have to obviously evolve with your business needs, and those are the kind of things we are making, and the search example which was given. So just to explain, back in the day, what was earlier happening was that the first article which Google search would give was for free. But it was it was the best article, and it was actually supposed to be behind paywalls. So we heard the news fraternity, and then we've actually made changes on search. So now what you do is, if it is actually behind the paywalls on your search page, there is a prompt that would you like to subscribe. So we ourselves are evolving in this whole ecosystem, and And that's why the need for partnerships to understand the needs of the publishers.
Thanks. I'll just follow on from Rajiv's point. I mean, the idea of it being both, I'll throw it open to the floor maybe later. I mean, the numbers are a bit different. The numbers globally are that total media, the total amount spent on print advertising, for example, globally, is probably about $50 billion. Google alone now is at $100 billion. So that's more than every newspaper on earth combined and doubled in terms of advertising revenue. And of course, digital revenue also, as Joe was saying, it's 50 to 60%, Google and Facebook. So, and as it's come up in previous panels, CPMs are dropping. On CPMs are dropping, our banners and so on, so it's an open question, and we'll just leave it at that. I mean, but there seems to be, even in the room and in previous discussions, real doubt about how viable the advertising model is and for how long. And just coming on to that, I think, back to representing my own corner as a publication from a place like Sri Lanka, we are like shrimp or canaries in the cage. We feel this faster than publications in India and other places. We have extremely small user bases. So say our flagship publications are in English. How many people read English? So a CPM, cost per 1,000. Once 5,000 people have read the article, that's everyone. So CPM doesn't necessarily work for us. A lot of the online model, subscription even, is difficult for us because how many potential subscribers do we have? We don't deal with the millions that you have here. So, small publishers in countries like us, and it's also happened in US regions, regional and in the West, local publications. Actually, it's very similar. These are the guys who've frankly really been hammered. Not so much you guys, it's the smaller guys who've been hammered. So the next question really is, and this is more cooperative, is what can you guys, bigger guys, this is Google, Dow Jones, Hindustan Times, do for the small and medium-sized publications?
I guess I'll go first. First of all, from a smaller publications perspective, we already work very collaboratively with a bunch of publications, right? So we've got like 250 to 300 partners that we take their content along with ours, and we actually work with partners such as Dow Jones, and we take it to all corners of the world. And so that helps, us bring both to our end consumers, to our partners, as well as to our partner publications. It helps bring a lot of value because when we take that bouquet approach, it just works well for everybody, including the end consumer. From the perspective of, how do you sort of approach a much smaller market like a Sri Lanka as opposed to a much bigger market than India? Ultimately, I think the reliance on subscription models is probably going to be higher in smaller geographies. I think we've seen that across the entire world. Wherever there have been smaller geographies in places in Europe and the like, the reliance on subscription has been higher because, first of all, the hyper-local nature of news means that you still have to have a news gathering apparatus. And then you become literally the only providers of their source of news. So as a result, now there's value there, and consumers are willing to pay for that value, whether it's for a physical print format or by subscribing to a TV channel or increasingly online subscriptions. But from a perspective of bigger players partnering with smaller players, I think it's happened through the decades. So there's nothing new there. Obviously, the way we partner with smaller publications is probably way different than Google partners with them. For us, it becomes a question of aligning our brands with the brands of small publications, and so we are a little bit picky. For Google, it becomes a question of sort of aggregating all the information across the entire world. So they're approaching it from a different scale and different sort of technology problem as well.
Yeah, I guess I can talk about in the context of Dow Jones and how we've built our international strategy, which relies on other publishers, large and small. So in light of what we've been talking about and some of the challenges that obviously we face fairly universally, we set ourselves, or our CEO set ourselves a goal about 4 years ago to reach 3 million subscribers globally in 3 years, which sounds fairly arbitrary, but at the time we had about 2.2 million subscribers, and that number was in decline. So there was a lot of work to be done. so we looked at the efforts to gain this delta of 800,000 or so to reach 3 million in 3 years, and of course a lot of that would have to come from our core market in the US, and I can talk about some of the methods we use and the technology changes and the data insights in the US, which has worked really, really well for us. But internationally, we had a bit of I guess a different challenge for us. And if we look at our flagship publication, the Wall Street Journal, we know that we had somewhat of a perception problem with the journal internationally. We have very strong brand recognition. A lot of people know the Wall Street Journal. But even for our target audience, we knew that a lot of those would perhaps see the journal is quite US-centric and not as internationally relevant. But then from various surveys and testing we did, we know that perception could change quite quickly. So if we got our content in the hands of the right people and got them engaged with it over a period of time, then that would change. And when we did this in some surveys, some of those people, actually quite a high percentage, actually chose to part with their own hard-earned cash after reading the journal regularly over a period of time. So this led us to think, well, then perhaps rather than us just going, looking to market direct to people internationally in various different markets, to sell direct subscriptions, is actually we're actually better off working with partners and established players that already have a build-up audience, that have a loyal audience, in a way that we can forge mutually beneficial partnerships to hit our own subscription goals internationally, but also, of course, for our partners. So a lot of this coincide with other publishers that have been toying with the idea of paywall launches, or some form of monetized digital content, where if rather than us looking to say, if you look at India for example, then and I think this is something that potentially we've actually got wrong before in the past, when we had a number of kind of local language sites in different regions, is that the Wall Street Journal is never going to be the first read or the choice for business news in India over the Hindustan Times or the Economic Times, and we're never going to have that kind of insight and the power and resource and be the first read. People won't subscribe to the journal over some of the obviously the national dailies, but perhaps we could position ourselves as the second read and complement some of these titles as well, as offering the global lens on global business insight as well. And that hasn't just been some of the large national newspapers as well. Is that this is worked for us in a number of regions, and to speak to some smaller kind of local publishers, some regional newspapers. We have partnerships with a newspaper that I'm sure nobody in this room has heard of, called Ryoko Shimpu, which is in Okinawa in Japan, which they still had a lot of the same challenges that other publishers do, but look to launch a paid digital product, and we've partnered with them to help add some value to their proposition. That the content that their customers had been used to getting for free for quite a period of time, by obviously bundling with our global insight and our subscriptions, help create something of value for a smaller publisher, and as a result of that, allow them to create a product and a new revenue stream to sell subscriptions.
Yeah, sorry, just quickly finish that. I think Joe and I discussed this a little bit before. Is fundamentally the idea of even bundle subscriptions. You subscribe to, say, a smaller paper in Sri Lanka or Japan, and you get access to Dow Jones content. And that's a reasonable value proposition. That makes sense. And I guess, again, when we go back to Google, the difference here is that, again, Dow Jones and us operate in the same basic ecosystem. So that's a clear win-win. Can you deliver the same win-win?
Okay, so firstly to the early question about large versus the smaller players, right? So the way we look at it, so we, like Rajiv mentioned, we're trying to solve it at a different level, right? So Google's mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible to all. So we are not focused on the large player or the small player. We don't differentiate at all, right? Our partnerships are basically, so when we look at a partnership, we're looking at three verticals where we are trying to solve in the three verticals. So first is about like creating engaging content, right? So creating engaging content, so there we would have initiatives like Google News Initiative, which is more about training journalists and with new tools, how to look at Google search, how to basically use Google Trends. So it's more about just helping them build great content, right? Engaging content. Last year, we've trained 5,000 journalists, and that's definitely not just with the large publishers, right? It's across the board. We're also trying to solve this thing at the journalism school level, right? So over 2018, we've done some 40 trainings in journalist schools, right? So that's one, it's about creating engaging content. The second platform or the second vertical we focus our partnerships or energies are towards distribution. How do you build products which can get your content distributed at ease? So that's where we work on stuff like AMP, so AMP project, Google Play subscriptions. So that's more about distribution. And the third vertical where we focus is on monetization, right? And that's where our products like the Ad Manager come in, where we partner with you and we want you to focus on creating great content, and you could use our technology to get monetization. And there we also support from a technology perspective and from a ads demand perspective. So we work across the board. We don't differentiate actually at all with the larger or smaller. For us, actually, it's the more we can do on scale, I think that's more interesting.
I'll have to, sorry to pick on you a bit, Rahul, but I have to take issue with one thing. You are the head of large partner solutions at Google India.
Right.
So you must differentiate a bit. There must be small partner and large partner. And the other question is, for example, the ANC in Lanka, we have thousands of staff, a couple of $1 million in revenue. Are we large or small? How does that work?
Okay, that's the large, how we differentiate it within Google, it's about skill sets, right? When you actually, so it's about, so there's a colleague of mine who's actually working with 500 publishers, and it's a different skill set of even the teams, right? I have a team of 4 people which have very different skill sets that will go really, really deep, and they will influence at very, so their skill sets are very, very different. So from the title, it's more about the skill sets of the people, because influencing at scale and influencing one-on-one is very different, right? We're also, so that's the main reason there, right?
No worries. I guess now this one is really to everyone and to the floor, that when this topic came up, partnerships, and it's extremely important. Journalism forums, conferences, we discuss this often. But the challenge is to find real strong concrete examples of these, either small, large, or large collaborations that really work and that really generate revenue, firstly within the industry and then outside. Is anyone collaborating with Airbnb successfully? Is anyone collaborating with conventional businesses, be they digital factual accuracy is fine, but regardless of where it comes from. So what we're talking about is the world of to some extent, the world of the influencer. You can empower small content creators, individual kids, and give them followings of thousands. And that's very viable. That's your interest, and it produces quality content. But that model has so far been a bit of a threat for us. Having tons of empowered bloggers and so on. I don't know. Perhaps my read is wrong, but the feeling is empowered influencers, which may be good or bad, it's sort of neutral depending on quality, works really well for you guys, but doesn't necessarily work for us. Thoughts on influence?
Yeah, but isn't information about empowering, right? It's when somebody in India who had never had a television in their house, they got a smartphone, and they started getting information that empowers, right? So it's, when you will get information, you will get empowered, right? And it's just not about a bunch of folks who are influencers or bloggers, but that's what happens, right? Now, we as an industry could choose to think that we are the source of authentic information, but that's not true today. Things have changed, right? Now, yes, it's our responsibility to ensure, it's our responsibility to ensure as a platform that at least what comes on our platform is authenticated and real. But the fact is it's happening, right? With smartphones in their hands, every person on the road is a journalist. They have a camera and they start shooting and they upload, right? And just not YouTube, Facebook, across platforms it goes up within minutes. The production time, which was 7 hours, is now a few minutes, right? So, I mean, that's something which we as an industry need to realize.
Can I sort of jump in as well? So, I think when we think about the content we produce under our brands, which is fact-checked and authenticated, as opposed to the content that some random Joe Schmo produces, there's a huge difference in that. And so I think, at least from our perspective, we welcome all that competition. Please go ahead and compete against the processes that we have in our newsrooms. Please go ahead and compete against even the basic English grammar we write versus what some random person writes. Like my mom forwards me a bunch of stuff on WhatsApp and whatnot, and some of that stuff is completely fallacious, right? And no, we're not competing against those people. Now, as an industry, we do have our work cut out for us, but we have lots of opportunities as well. As opposed to the days of the print newspaper, where you have to literally drive to your consumer's home and deliver the newspaper, or TV, where you have to acquire expensive frequencies, or even radio. The internet is boundaryless. So a small publication today, as long as it has the appetite for it and can produce the content, it can go and become a global player. So there's nothing really stopping even small players, as long as they're producing things of quality for consumers, to aspire to become $1 billion, even $1 trillion company today. So I think our ambitions are really up to us. But we have to solve basic problems. We can't go and outsource, but we can't go and outsource our home pages to Google or Facebook. We can't say, like, look, people are only going to come to us by discovering our stuff on Google or Facebook. As long as we take control of our destiny, which includes, obviously, investing in journalism, but also going and building viable consumer experiences, viable monetization, I think it's actually a great time to be in the media industry.
I might just jump ahead maybe to the next one, and we're running out of time. The final one here is that as we've seen difficulty for publications globally, there has been a move, particularly, again, I mean, thanks, Rajiv, because you're speaking from a position of strength and confidence, whereas many publications actually speak from a position of fear and weakness. It's the reality. And you've seen this already in the US and Europe, where publications have tried to cabal themselves, have tried to make themselves, for collective bargaining. This has happened in Europe with this proposed link taxes, basically trying to compel Google to pay news organizations for linking back. In the US has tried, US news groups have tried to combine to work, to negotiate with Facebook and Google, and I think those are in court right now. So again, I think you're not on the side, but again, the question of partnerships, in the world of partnerships, is it perhaps time, say even in the Indian landscape, to consider collaboration for collective bargaining, or no, there are other options?
So, of course, I think from the perspective of shared sort of interests, we are coming together in coalitions such as the DNPA, right? That's why we formed it. We were pretty concerned about things like fake news, and we said, okay, let's try to bring together some authenticated publications which produce trustworthy content, have strong brands. Let's try to combat some of the issues together. I personally believe in free markets. So to that extent, I think as long as you produce valuable content and a valuable consumer experience, I think consumers are going to be fine in giving you good business. There are issues where, I think companies have to decide what they are. Are they just dissemination platforms or are they content companies? So for example, if Google has to go and start publishing election results and the like, and we are now competing on sort of, not on a fair ground, where we are held to a certain level of scrutiny and they're not, and they're saying, look, we're just publishing something aggregated somewhere. I think there's some matters of concern for us, and we talk about them openly, including to Google. I think those are issues that will resolve themselves over time. But I don't think we are going to be able to collude our way out of our problems.
Joe?
So yeah, I mean, it's something that's even been discussed at the highest levels of my business with things like carrier fees for paying publishers. I'll be surprised if that's a reality anytime soon. But I think in terms of coming together, that the collective voice is useful into discussing what we need to do to push our businesses forward. I think the question of scale alone hasn't really proven itself to be that successful at the moment. I guess if we look kind of recently, some of the businesses that the new kind of disruptor media businesses that thought they had they had cracked the code, the likes of BuzzFeed, Mashable, and Vice, that only a couple of years ago had huge valuations that were mostly kind of pumped up on VC capital, that were reliant purely on scale before profitability have obviously taken a bit of a turn recently, and we've heard recently of layoffs in journalists across some of these businesses that haven't really proven their business model. But then the news isn't all doom and gloom, and there are have been some huge success stories in the kind of commercial side of news businesses as well. And predominantly these are companies that are focusing on producing quality content and getting that right, and then obviously building a business model that around that to match it. And that really, I think that whilst there's different nuances in different markets, that really that people are, I mean, there's more content available now than ever there has been before, without question. But people are realizing that if they want to get quality content, then they may well have to pay for it, and they know where to go for it. Some of the trusted titles, and I think that's the way that's been driving the industry forward.
Rahul, your take, and then we'll open questions.
Sure.
I think
so. I think we have to rephrase this. So a lot of this, the collective bargaining, has been tried in a lot of countries, and yes, but I can just give the India example, and especially with DNPA, right? These folks have got together, but they are not about collective, and we've interacted with them a lot. They're not about collective bargaining. It's about collective solving the problem. So in fact, we've got invited, and they want us to talk more. So for us, it's obviously, so it's about what you want to do, right? Do you want to collectively bargain, or do you want to collectively solve for the system, right? Solve for the businesses. So so my interaction is I think it's been 6 months, which the DNP is launched. But I see that difference, that they want to talk, they want to know how we can together solve for some issues, and also what they're putting up, some of the challenges what they are facing, right? In the last meeting we had, like Rajeev mentioned about republishing election results, right? So these are issues which they have, and that's where in fact, we would like to know exactly what's happening. And we understand, and now as a group, when we sit, we're able to actually understand, be more empathetic about what they are facing, and then influence our product to make those changes. So I personally feel that it's about what approach you are taking when you form that thing. And I mean,
yeah, I think we have about 10, 15 minutes. So that's it. We know the consensus seems to be collaboration, quality content, subscription looks like the way forward. And yeah, questions from the floor, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Vijay. I'm from Gramvani, and we are trying to build a bottom-up voice-based community media platform, largely targeting a segment of the population which I would believe has been not tapped as much as it could have been till date, right? So, and we are embarking on a journey where we are building a digital destination or an internet destination, while until now it's been mostly the voice and IVR technology. We're embarking on a journey where we're building a internet destination for this segment of the population, which is the large, low income, more than 50%, almost close to 500 million people who still aren't there on the internet, but mostly excluded from the opportunity to participate, engage, get right information at the right time, and even contribute to the larger narrative or the larger discussion. And most of the policies and everything that gets talked about for them, and they're not part of that discussion. So we're actually building that sort of a property. And while I've heard over the past yesterday and today that advertising is not really an option or a great option going forward in terms of as a revenue proposition, we oddly are at a situation where we're actually embarking on that journey and do believe that advertising could be an opportunity for us and an important opportunity for us from a revenue standpoint. So there are two questions I have. One is that this segment of the population, largely untapped, right? Even from an advertising perspective, there is a view or a perspective that it's not a very commercially viable segment, which we fail to understand or agree with. And two is that how do we then obviously make it really viable? And if partnerships are the route, then what kind of partnerships do you see working in this particular space? And considering that Google and the others, obviously the other forms of media also are working in terms of trying to build this ecosystem and also target this rural population, how do you think this is going to span out?
Before you put the floor, could you just tell me again, what's the fundamental nature of your content? What sort of articles, how does it engage?
So it is voice-based. It is in fact a lot of user-generated content, community-driven, which means that it's hyper-local, which means as low as, for example, people in a district talking about development-related issues or topics pertaining to what's impacting them from, in matters of health, governance, accountability, inclusion, right? Matters that are life-changing for them, right? So a simple example, right? So there is a huge program that's been launched by the government for the rural population, but they don't get informed about it, right? So what we do is that we create information, or we pass on that information in vernacular local voice on this platform to these people, and we also allow them to actually respond, ask queries, share their opinions, views, all in vernacular voice without the need for internet, without, in fact, until now, but
thanks.
Going forward,
I mean, an answers. What can we do for a publication of this nature?
What's your reach and what are your MEUs or stickiness? Can you talk about those numbers? Like, are you just starting out? Or are you already at scale? I guess that's the question I'm trying to answer.
So we're there in about 20 odd districts.
Yeah.
We've been able to build, we have almost about 100,000 unique users on the voice platform.
Yeah.
Month on month, and almost 8 minutes of usage every call. from a user. And these are people who do not have access to other forms of media, and hence the stickiness is definitely quite strong. Right? And now we are moving on to an app medium, which is where we're trying to get a lot of the youth and also people who are now first-time technology users and people who are coming onto the smartphone ecosystem, right? And as we build more traction and engagement, the unique part is that we actually have people on the ground in these communities who we create a club structure with and train them as citizen journalists, and they are the ones who contribute a lot of hyperlocal content and news as well. Right. So I'm
sorry, so I better cut you off and get to. Otherwise,
okay. So I think just a quick answer to your question would be: I think you might be a little bit early for us. I think though my friends at Google are probably much more plugged into the early stage of that ecosystem which you represent right now. But talk to us after you get a little bit more traction, because vernacular is one of the bigger plays that we'd be investing in.
Yeah, actually, so yeah, voice is something, and you started with monetization. So voice is something we are working on. I mean, if you know, for the last 2 years, it's all about assistant, it's all about voice, right? But do we have a solution on monetization of voice? No, right? Would we want to have a solution? Yes, because I mean, it's an ads-driven company, but the fact is, currently we are way away from even thinking of monetization. Just from a partnership perspective, obviously since you're trying to solve things at the grassroots level, there's tons of opportunity there. There's obviously, Tata Trust is doing a lot of good stuff, right? We have some of the initiatives that we are actually taking, imparting digital knowledge to women in villages, and they are being the influencers. So there are tons of opportunities on partnership, definitely, but monetization, I would stay a little away from a tech stack point. But having said that, to your point, is the TG are you operating in, is that monetizable? Definitely yes, right? There are multiple verticals, FMCG. I mean, I can rattle it out, but there are multiple verticals who are communicating with these guys and who are doing advertising communication, but on different platforms like outdoor, print. So it's still happening. But yeah, the tech is a little, we're a little away from the tech.
We'll take another question.
Yeah, hi. My question is for Sawan again, that like most of the medium publishers are dependent on firms like Facebook or Google to bring the traffic in and get a share of revenue there. And then once the traffic is in there, then the ads which are being, the revenue you guys are getting are again, the major share of it will again go to the tech companies. So the fear of the partnership, is it lies between that you will not able to exist without these technologies company, or the fear is that the major share of revenue will go to such tech companies?
Yeah, good question. It's again back to alignment, basis of partnership, I think. We're talking about partnerships. You need your interests to be aligned. You also need a certain amount of mutual respect. And the fear on our side is we need them, but they don't necessarily need us. And that is why we have sometimes an imbalance. I mean, I think Rahul went into it. I mean, content is important. I mean, you guys do need content. But the problem is that there are many ways to generate content, not necessarily through us. We are not also necessarily the good guys. In some of these collective bargaining efforts, what mid-sized publishers try to do is install themselves at the expense of startups and so on. That's kind of our interest. So the fear, and again, that's my original point. It's very easy to demonize Facebook and Google. So we don't want to go too far down that path. It's more about what can we do. But some of it comes from experience, that some of the early partnerships, as even Joe was noting, it didn't work. I mean, and again, some of the models that we are offered, especially for, say, again, back to mid-sized small publications in a place like Sri Lanka, CPM doesn't work very well for us. If something is wrong, we have no one to call. You know, Google may exist in our, we need them. They don't even have an office. There's no one to call. We're just walking around like, oh God, what do we do? The same with Facebook, because they don't need to, the honest truth is they don't need to take our calls. A small publication in Sri Lanka with, 10,000, is it really very high up on Mr. Zuckerberg's priority list? No. So that's the fear. I don't know how, but I think Rahul has responded, saying that it is in their it is in the interest to generate content and the ecosystem, and we have experience in content, and Google can't do that yet, or may not want to, but yeah.
I think I would have slightly maybe different view on that. So when you look at ourselves as publications, first of all, we need to lose the fear of technology. We need to invite the technologists in, and we need to become technology companies. We need to start understanding how internet businesses are built if we aspire to build digital businesses. Secondly, while we look at sources of traffic, including sources of traffic coming from Google, we can't treat every source of traffic the same. We need to have a very good understanding of who our audiences are, and we need to make sure that we treat Google as one of our acquisition partners, not necessarily playing the Google game as the be-all and end-all of our business. The same way on the monetization side, if somebody is bringing us ad revenue and taking a cut for it, they're doing work for it too. So they need to charge their cut for it. And if we think we can get a better cut, let's go build our sales teams and revenue teams, and let's go, take ownership of problems. So I guess overall, what I'm saying is, I think I see too much of us feeling like victims in the industry, where we just need to start taking charge of our problem and solving them one by one. And portion of it is really developing a lot of new skill sets, which we are sorely lacking right now in our industry.
Yeah, I think just one thing, right? Just one thing which I want to add. We need to, my first job was at Hindustan Times, where he's working. And I was selling print. But, we were not, the word fear never came into our heads, right? This room is people who are writing content, and there are people who want to read your content, right? So I think we should stop, let's not use the word fear. It's not about fear, right? Understand the technology, understand the user, and you're building great content, so just continue doing that. The fact is, when you actually adopt technology, even if I give you the best platform, it's very daunting to adopt it, right? And then it's easiest to say it's fear, and then do we want to work with Google, Facebook, Twitter, whoever? It's more on a philosophical level. But the fact is that you have to embrace what is happening, right? It's happening. Technology is changing where business is operating, and let's not take it as a fear, but let's take it as an opportunity, because now you can reach way more people than what your newspaper could earlier geographically reach, right? So it's the way you look at it. I think that's where I would leave it at.
Just one, there was a question at the back.
I've been asking way too many questions at this conference, but I'm very, very interested. I wanted to kind of return back to the theme of the panel, which is looking about how people build partnerships. First of all, my understanding is that Google News Initiative is not so much a partnership fund as it is a support for the building of relationships and the creation of content. So it's not a partnership fund in that sense. In fact, my understanding is that it comes out of Google's marketing budget. But what I'm curious about is, what have you four gentlemen observed in terms of publishers building partnerships with each other and with non-media outlets or non-media organisations that better serve their audiences? What sorts of case studies have you seen, or advice that you might have to people who are thinking we should be in partnership with someone, we don't really know what that looks like, what are the skill sets that are involved, and so on?
Yeah, I can certainly talk about so partnerships between publishers, or yeah. I think so. For us, if we go back from, I think where we made some mistakes before is certainly when I first came to Asia, we had a kind of a sprawling list of partnerships across different sites, different organisations, with all of the view of well, if we can have partnerships with as many different players and drive as much traffic back to us, then surely that can't hurt us. That's going to only drive more eyeballs and hopefully more subscriptions. But it became kind of unmanageable and without kind of real metrics involved in it, and it wasn't really driving towards our goal. So that's why we looked to change to have kind of really more, I guess, fewer, bigger, better partnerships with other publishers. And for us, this doesn't speak to everyone, but other other publishers that are ambitious about focusing on paid content as well, and that's why we obviously has a different objective in some of the smaller markets, but we're still looking to drive subscriptions. Is work with some of the smaller publishers to help enhance the overall product offering. So if it's a publisher that has that focuses on local content and does that very, very well, but you actually have a very, very interesting audience for us still, that we might be able to enhance that with, I guess, some of our global content. But then also, we've been selling subscriptions. We have a paywall for over 20 years. So what we've looked to do with some of the smaller publishers as well is, when we're able to create those genuine win-win situations, is actually share as much of our insight as well and say, look, no, these are the mistakes that we've made over this period of time. These are things that we did wrong, but this is actually what's really working for us. And it may not be exactly the same in our core market as in your market, but these are the things that are working. And if we can create those win-win situations, then as much leverage and knowledge that we can share to some other publishers, then when they grow, we're growing as well. So we've both got skin in the game. So I think that's something to look at for publishers of all sizes of looking at tie-ups with other publishers. And they don't have to be all kind of large scale, any kind of joint venture or necessarily a new product launch. But I think that these conversations of sharing insight together have been hugely beneficial for us. And I know, just to give you a kind of an insight for us, how important that has been, is that out of the goal that we had to take us to the 3 million subscriptions, actually about 30% of that growth came from our international publishing partners as well. So, and that was obviously is very good for us, but that's been net sales for our publishers as well. And and that can't all be credited to us, but a part of it can be. So it's been hugely beneficial for us and our partners.
I'll jump in with a answer and question. I think Rajiv, it's shifted my opinion on this, because I was initially struggling, and then maybe it's another way of looking at it. Because if you look at partnerships, news and non-news, I think some of the big ones are Jack Ma and the South China Morning Post, or Naspers and Tencent, and again Amazon is also, and Washington. These are big cross-industry, cross-structural collaborations. I think they're all relatively new. We don't know what they can, we don't know to what that will bring down the line. But these partnerships are actually happening. They're happening on a bigger scale than you initially realize. And in terms of how they happen, I think your fundamental question, in these cases, they are, because often we talk about things like, oh, partnership is training. Maybe it isn't. Maybe partnership is investment. Maybe it is taking an equity stake and running with it.
So when I sort of think through the industry we are in, we are essentially in a consumer industry. We have consumers who consume something that we produce. And to me, everything sort of starts from consumer need. So understanding who your core consumer is, what do they need, then understanding what portion of it can you create yourself, what is strategically important for you to own, and what you're good at doing. And then figuring out if there's some missing pieces, then maybe a partnership comes into play there. Then if your end consumer is someone whom you can't reach properly, because you have something they value but you can't really get to that audience, then you look at partners like a Google, for example, or other distribution. And then in order to make this whole thing work, you need to make money. And that's where you might look for monetization partners. But it all starts from understanding who the consumer is, understanding who the consumer need is, and then providing, using that as a framework to think about partnerships. At least from my perspective, I never think sort of partnerships in. I always think consumer needs and consumers in, and then partnerships out.
I think just to add to your point as well, I think we have seen a lot more of that in the industry, and whereas we have sometimes questionable motives of billionaires buying newspapers, which we could debate all day. But I think that another really interesting one that happened a few years ago now was when the FT was acquired, and a lot of people thought it might have been News Corp. Or maybe possibly bought out by another billionaire, but Nikkei was a bit of a surprise I think for many people at the time, is an unusual partner for the Financial Times. But actually, there've been conversations going on for a long time and content. But really, if you think about the landscape in Japan, that is really unique industry for news, and that it has a really high levels of engagement, but was slow to adapt to digital practices. That actually the FT was one of the real leaders that have been very good at digital for quite a long period of time. And now fast forward a few years, that actually in Japan, one of the players that's doing digital the best and selling subscriptions is also Nikkei. So that, there's a lot more involved in that partnership that built up over a long period of time, and we'll, I guess time will tell how it will be successful in the future. But so far, it's been I think it's been promising.
Yeah. Do we have more questions? Then we have a bit more time. So in terms of taking the discussion forward, I think we're at a fairly interesting point. We have a little bit more time. Is that we've talked about actually how do we collaborate. So it turns out that in many cases, the nuts and bolts of it is if you see a startup or a medium-sized newspaper, the best thing to do is to perhaps put the money down and work on a new product or a new service. I think Dow Jones is interesting because, of course, you have diverse investments. MediaCorp does take stakes in even fairly, I know you own Fijian newspapers, for example. So a simple open thing as a medium-sized Sri Lankan newspaper, if I wish to broad-base my business and sell you a stake, or if you want to, do we want to collaborate and start a new digital platform in Tamil, can I ask you for $500,000? I don't know how that goes.
Me personally?
Yeah, let's go. I don't know how will that conversation go? What must I do to get $500,000 for you for a Tamil publication?
We're Dow Jones are lucky that we're I'm talking about billionaire owners of newspapers, but we're supported by News Corp, and we do take stakes. Some have worked out better than others. And some MySpace never worked out that well for News Corp. If I could give you an example, and more recently, and certainly my time in Asia, so we had a commercial partnership with a company which was at the time actually pretty unknown known in Japan, called Userbase, and they had two parts of their business. One was a professional part of their business, which gave kind of M&A data and insights, but then they launched effectively a news aggregator as well, where they took, it was all Japanese language, but other news sources into their platform. But they were just very good at digital. They understood their audience. They moved quickly. They innovated, and we launched a partnership with them on the same terms that I've been talking about, where we integrated our product into their platform. When they sold a premium subscription product, it also included journal content, and that was just took off. It was really successful. As a result, I got our CEO, Will Lewis, who came to Japan and met with the CEO there as well. And they were still at the time a relatively new business, and was very impressed with the growth what they had planned. And they were looking to. They had an incredible product that was clearly working. They managed to exceed paying subscribers in their product in 2 years, beyond any of the large national dailies that have millions and millions of subscribers. So they were clearly getting something right. But they wanted to launch in the US as well and take their platform to the US. And they knew that we obviously were a good avenue to do that. And then after many discussions after that, we actually launched a joint venture with them in the US to launch a US version of NewsPicks, which was in 2017. And that really came from some conversations that we had in the beginning many years ago, but it's just a relationship that snowballed to the point where it went up the ranks and gained the interest for us to invest in it. Since then, actually, the user base are a bit more well known. Since going to the US, they've now acquired Quartz, so they've kind of gained some acclaim on the global stage. But that was really something from it was effectively a startup that did very, very well, and then they IPO'd. But it was really starting from a small conversation that we had, and they had a great product.
I'll just throw it because we're now running out of time. But I think for GNI, for example, in really the sort of test case, I'm a publisher. I have some sort of business plan, maybe in a niche language or a investigative journalism product. I mean, are you willing to come in? Will you support with trading, or are there worlds in which you will support with investment and funds?
Yeah. Okay. So GNI outrightly, we don't. It's not the investment arm of Google, right? So we are not investing in companies. But having said that, we do fund projects, and I'll give you an example, right? Let's say in Sri Lanka, you want to test like subscription businesses, right? And you want to say in the small market, we want to test how does subscription models work, and we want to try the Google subscription model, but we need to invest in so many engineers, and we need to do X, Y, Z things. So we need this kind of investment. So that's the kind of fund. So we'll invest in problems which could actually then we could make a white paper out of it and then go to small publications like yours and then tell them, hey, this is the way it should be done. So yes, we are definitely open to looking at funding ideas which actually help you solve business problems. And the best way is we ran a innovation fund, and across APAC, India had the highest entries. So it's really encouraging for us to at least the Google News initiative is actually, at least we are able to do something and let people know about it, because it was like Australia, Japan, we had like the maximum entries. The results are not out yet, but we had some very good entries coming in. So we're more than happy to fund business problems, but that's not the investment arm, so we don't make investments in that.
I guess I can share my perspective on two sort of levels, being an individual investor as well as a strategic investor, including at HT. As an individual investor, I would invest in things which I can bring value into. And so if it's an idea that I feel I can elevate it somehow, I'll probably come on board as an investor and sort of help that way. As a strategic, we generally invest in things that can give us some strategic benefit. So at Samsung, for example, when I was a strategic investor, our aim was, of course, we didn't want to go lose the company tons of money in our investments, but at the same time, our aim was really to go invest in something that could become a potential partner that we could bring onto a flagship Samsung device. So from the perspective of the whoever is looking for an investment, it really, in the early stages, comes down to maybe one thing only, which is the quality of your team. So if you've got a great team, you've got a great track record, most likely you'll be able to get individual strategics on board. Strategics in case there's some sort of strategic overlap with what you're trying to do. At the mid stages, it really comes down to metrics. So for example, the conversation we were starting to have with gentlemen over there is what kind of traction do you have? And then at that point becomes maybe an easier way to sort of evaluate it. And that's where standard VCs and the like jump in, and then if you've got the metrics, then nobody really questions whether or not you deserve the money. I think more anything sort of outside of the framework, then you're down to relationships. And of course, you can get funded for relationships, but that's probably not a great way to plan things out.
I think that's unless there's anything else or any further questions, I think we're good in terms of partnerships. I'll just throw it out there that I think particularly for you, Rajiv, I mean publications like us, because again, even when the conversations come up, we are looking at India, Australia, Japan. The problem is Sri Lanka, Nepal, Myanmar, Cambodia. We are. That's a problem. And you, to some extent, the scale of publications like the HT may have the answer. You have capabilities that we can share, and that can take the form of investment. And I think that just as an outsider looking at India's media environment, which is strong, healthy, and confident compared to anywhere else that I've seen, I think the weakness that I see to everyone, all the publishers here, is that they don't seem to be aggressive enough going out. Indian publications, there is no, as well known, there is no Indian Al Jazeera. It is India focused. And maybe the opportunity is you have financial strength, you have capability, is to start making the investments in Cambodia, Myanmar, or Lanka, which gives you global reach. It's in your interest and gives us capacity. Just a thought for all Indian publishers. Thanks, everyone.
That's why we're here.
Yep, lunchtime. Lunch? I think we're now ready for lunch. So thank you. Thank you, Pan. Thank you, everyone else.